The manga begins with a mocking sentence written on the sand, declaring that if he loves playing with sand so much, he should remain trapped in it forever. Standing there, the main character reads the meaning behind those words and slowly comes to realize the weight of the situation. Forced relocation from the castle of the White Desert into the desert itself marks the end of the life he once knew. In that moment, the main character reflects on the past, shifting to memories from 3 years ago within the Maghreb Empire. At that time, Prince Horus, only 12 years old, was receiving warm congratulations on his birthday. He accepts the praise with gratitude, aware that this age is the turning point when a prince is finally allowed to learn about his magical attribute. Whispers spread among the servants as one maid asks the head maid about the prince's element. Among the 5 gifted, Horus holds the greatest magical power, leading many to expect a strong affinity like fire. Some argue for wind, while others hope for water, admired for its elegance. A shadow falls when a maid hints at Horus's background, but another silences her, reminding it is a day of celebration. Horus remains quiet, expecting nothing. The moment finally arrives when he approaches the great device meant to reveal his attribute. As its judgment emerges, the result spreads through the chamber. His element is declared to be sand. The celebration comes to a halt, and the once lively room falls into sudden silence as everyone absorbs the shocking revelation. Prince Horus looks around the silent hall, wondering about the sudden change in everyone's reaction. He realizes the truth. Sand is considered a single-level element, one that cannot combine with or wield any other type of magic. Despite his great magical power, the whispers around him carry only scorn. To them, a concubine's child is still unworthy of respect, and their words brand him useless. Tears form as the insults echo, calling him inferior and a disgrace to the royal family. That moment marks the end of his life as a prince of the Maghreb Empire, sealed by his own father's judgment that he is nothing but a shame to the family. Branded as the concubine's son with nothing more than a single sand affinity, he is cast out. Exile strips him of his place and future. Now standing in the desert, Prince Horus reflects on what might have been. Would things have turned out differently if his affinity had not been sand? He clutches his chest tightly, gritting his teeth as the thought burns within him. He knows that sand magic, while despised, holds untapped power. A charred message reaches him, one meant for his third brother. With bitterness he recalls how hard he once tried, hoping to prove his worth someday, yet he accepts the cruel joke that, as the third child, he is nothing but discarded. Even surrender cannot change his fate. Resolving himself, he chooses to live here in the desert, believing it to be the rightful place for a prince of sand. Strengthening his heart, he focuses on survival. His first task is clear: find water. Pressing his palm gently into the dunes, he summons sand sense and locates a reaction. His magic stirs the grains, ripples spreading like waves across the desert floor, carrying him forward. He recalls how others once smiled cruelly, thinking banishment was punishment, but here in this boundless land he feels invincible. For one with a gradual mastery of sand magic, this place is unmatched. He summons a technique called Sand Whirl, the swirling force digging deeper until finally something precious emerges. Right before his eyes, water rises to the surface. Relief strikes him. It is water at last. With survival secured, he turns to the next task, finding a place to live. Channeling his magic, he shapes the desert itself into shelter, forming what he names the Sand Castle, his new home amidst the endless dunes. He steps back to take in his creation and nods with quiet satisfaction, thinking it does not look bad at all. Yet inside, the vast walls feel plain and empty, lacking the spirit of a true fortress. He considers modifying the design, deciding that a castle must have both beauty and strength. Through his control of the sand, he expands the structure, adding a grand lobby, guest rooms, a kitchen, and even a throne room. He creates a private chamber for himself, unsteady yet determined, marking the beginning of his solitary life in the desert. Still, he's alone, so he resolves to create a companion, a sand golem, a protector who will stand by his side. Trusting the creature with his safety, he sighs on his bed, imagining what more could be built. With water and plants now nearby, his mind drifts to new desires, windows of glass, more decorations, and useful materials yet to be found. Determined, he taps into his sand sense again, sending waves of awareness through the desert. The ripple spreads far and wide, then he feels it. Someone has collapsed, and several others are nearby. A surge of alarm hits him. Sensing danger, he doesn't hesitate. He leaves the castle at once, riding a sand wave that carries him swiftly across the dunes. The scene comes into focus. Monsters surround a collapsed girl. A group of goblins is attacking a camel that's desperately trying to protect her. The danger is clear as the creatures close in, ready to strike. Just then, Prince Horus arrives. In a flash, he forms a spear of sand and sweeps it through the air. The weapon slices through the goblins in one powerful strike. Within seconds, the threat is gone. The camel stands in stunned confusion, unable to comprehend what just happened. Prince Horus steadies himself, murmuring that he arrived just in time. Yet the danger is not over. The goblins' bodies, instead of being destroyed, seep into the ground and re-emerge, their forms rising once more from the shifting sands. In an instant, they reform and surround him again, closing in on all sides. Horus creates a distraction with sand magic. He raises a sandstone wall ahead, drawing the goblins toward the camel and leaving himself clear to strike. A sand ring forms into a sliding blade and slices through the goblins, ending the fight. He approaches the camel and its rider. The camel shows trust and lets him near. Horus uncovers the girl hidden beneath a rag. He notices her beauty but reminds himself that this is not the time to stare. He lifts her carefully and tells the camel he will help them. The camel follows as Horus guides them, moving forward on shifting sands shaped by his magic. They arrive at Horus's castle. The camel is astonished to be welcomed inside. The girl is laid on a bed, and Horus realizes she will not recover without proper nourishment. He steps out and extends his senses through the desert. Far away, he detects signs of life. He travels across the sands and discovers black ants clashing with white ants. Horus strikes with a sand spear and instantly wipes out the black ants. The rest scatter, while the white ants approach him gratefully. Horus senses their intent and acknowledges them before returning. The ants present Horus with a strange gift. He looks at it closely and realizes it is a sweet liquid sealed in a thin membrane. The scent is rich and pleasant and honey. Though surprised, he accepts it with gratitude and bids the ants farewell. Returning to the castle, Horus gently pours the honey into the girl's mouth, little by little. At first, nothing happens, then her throat stirs and she swallows. Relief washes over him. He silently vows that he will save her no matter what. Exhausted, he remains by her side through the night, keeping watch as she rests. When morning comes, Horus opens his eyes to find the girl awake and gazing at him. Her beauty leaves him momentarily stunned. She speaks softly, thanking him for saving her and wishing she could repay him. Horus reassures her that there is no need, as he is only glad to see her alive. Yet before he can say more, she blushes and shyly asks if she may stay with him. The request catches him completely off guard, and he stares at her in surprise, unsure how to respond. The girl insists she will do anything to stay. Horus hears the word anything, and for a moment, he slaps his own cheek to bring himself back. He asks about her story, and she introduces herself as Isis. She names the camel Raikou and thanks him for saving them. Horus simply replies with his name and asks why she collapsed in the desert. Isis sits on the bed and avoids details. She says she was driven out of her country. Horus feels a sting of recognition and admits he was exiled too. He explains that his sand attribute kept him alive in the desert and that sand is everywhere here. Isis touches the sand-carved walls and runs her hand along a pillar. She scans the room and then the whole castle with wide-eyed wonder. She notices the doors, the walls, the pillars, all shaped from sand with impossible skill. She asks if Horus built it all himself. He answers yes. Her voice tightens with anger at the injustice she hears. She cannot hide how unfair it feels that someone so talented is cast out for a sand attribute. Moved, she clasps Horus's hands and proposes they build something together. She speaks with fierce determination and then flushes as she clarifies she means to repay him and find a home, not anything more. Her words tumble out in a nervous flow. Horus watches her and finds himself smiling. He offers his hand in return and tells her they are both people without a place to go and that they should help each other. Isis relaxes into the promise, and for the first time, the castle feels less empty. Isis blushes and places her hand in Horus's, agreeing to move forward together. Horus wastes no time and summons a sand wave. The ground ripples beneath them, carrying both Isis and Raikou swiftly across the desert. The sudden speed leaves Isis wide-eyed and overwhelmed, while the camel seems to enjoy the ride. She asks about the magic, and Horus explains it is the sand wave that lets them travel swiftly across the sands. At her request, they slow down and stop near an oasis. Horus points out the plants they can gather. When she asks how he found it, he explains his sand-based detection that senses vibrations across the desert. She marvels at the precision of the spell. He then uses his sand spear to pierce a coconut from a tree, letting it fall into his hands. Soon he sets out to hunt and gather more supplies. Back at the castle, Horus works tirelessly, using sand magic not only for movement and hunting, but also for storing food, removing air for preservation, and managing resources near water. Isis watches in awe, realizing how versatile his sand attribute truly is. She thinks that with such abilities, they could even manage storage and transport for a kingdom. Behind the castle, Horus plants cactus, but admits the place still doesn't feel like an oasis. Isis steps forward with confidence and tells him to leave it to her. Using life magic, she accelerates the growth of a sprouting coconut tree. Before Horus's eyes, it transforms from a sapling into a full, flourishing tree heavy with coconuts. She urges the leaves to embrace the sunlight, and more trees rise to life around them. Horus stands amazed. The once barren land now blossoms into a living oasis through Isis's magic. Isis smiles with a soft blush in her eyes and says the oasis is complete. Horus instinctively makes a hand gesture as if knocking against hers and praises her, then suddenly realizes what he just did. Isis quickly shifts the moment by asking if she can take a bath, and Horus agrees, thinking they have been outside all day, and she likely wants to wash away the sweat. He decides to wait at the entrance, but wonders if he smells the same. Hidden behind a tree, Isis lets out a deep sigh. Everything had happened so quickly, and out of pride, she refused to let the one who saved her think she smelled unpleasant. She even asks Raku if she stinks. The camel answers with nothing but an odd, sticky expression that makes her sigh again. Finally, she steps into the oasis, submerging herself in the cool water. The relief spreads across her body as she bathes, washing away dirt and stress. She thinks about Horus as she cleans herself, wondering what she can do to repay him. She asks Raku what would make a boy happy, questioning whether it is even right for her to ask. Still, her mind keeps circling back to the truth. He saved her life, and she must repay him somehow. Meanwhile, Horus is battling his own thoughts outside. He tells himself not to think wickedly, not to imagine the beautiful girl bathing just beyond the trees. His heart races with flustered tension until suddenly he hears Isis scream. He rushes toward her in alarm. She calls out that the honey ants are there, but in the panic, both realize the situation. Isis is standing in the water with nothing to cover herself, her face a mix of fear and embarrassment. Horus quickly turns away, covering his eyes. He insists he saw nothing, though his words blur mid-sentence as he struggles to keep his composure. Isis, now covered, explains that she was only bathing when the ants appeared. Horus admits he was startled, while the ants move restlessly in front of them as if trying to communicate. Though their meaning is unclear, Isis suggests they want the two of them to follow. The ants nod, confirming her guess. Horus reasons that if they are to live in this desert, it may be best to cooperate. He agrees, and they set off. Riding the sand wave, Horus carries Isis and Reiko swiftly across the desert until they reach a massive structure built of hardened earth, an enormous ant nest shaped like a fortress. They follow their guides inside and step into vast caverns. Horus marvels at the spaciousness and realizes this nest lies outside the range of his sand detection. They pass many chambers, and Horus notices an ant missing one of its legs, a sign of past battles. Eventually, they are led into a grand hall as large as those found in imperial palaces. At its center sits a figure on a throne of packed earth, the queen of the honey ants. She is a towering humanoid with an air of authority, and her voice resonates as she welcomes them and introduces herself as the overseer of the nest. Horus and Isis exchange a glance of surprise before introducing themselves in turn. The scene shifts to the open desert, where Horus rides his sand wave beside the queen. She thanks him for accepting their request and asks if he is certain about his decision. Horus assures her that in a boundless desert, survival requires helping one another. Moments earlier, the queen explained her need for an escort. She intends to negotiate directly with the king of the iron ants, warning that without aid, her honey ants, weak in combat, will eventually fall in the ongoing conflict. She requested him to lend the power he had used against the iron ants. Horus considered the situation carefully, recognizing the honey ants' weakness in combat and the need to stabilize their place in the desert. He proposed forming a mutual exchange. He would provide magic, strength, and enhancements, while the honey ants would supply their honey. The queen accepted the proposal without hesitation. Horus suggested they move immediately, surprising the queen with his readiness. As they advanced through the desert, Isis reflected on the overwhelming strength of his sand-based abilities. noting how his combat movements were unmatched. The queen herself admitted her disbelief at receiving support from someone so powerful. Horus reminded them that cooperation helped both sides equally. Soon they arrived at the Iron Ant's Nest, a towering structure resembling a fortress. At the entrance, 2 black ants stood guard. Horus approached them, preparing for confrontation, but the queen urged restraint, asking only that he incapacitate and not kill. Horus unleashed a massive sand wave that rose like a tsunami, swiftly overwhelming the guards and leaving them unconscious. He then used Standbind to immobilize the remaining ants outside, securing them tightly to the ground for containment. Horus decides the show of force is enough, and they move into the nest. He taps the walls and notes their surprising width and sturdiness, wondering what material they use. The queen explains the structure is forged from iron sand, formed where the ants dwell. Horus thinks that, though called iron sand, it is still sand, and that if he could master it, he might even bargain with the king for a share. He presses his palm to the wall, and the castle trembles under his control. Everyone reacts in shock. Isis marvels at the walls, feeling as if they are alive, and the queen admits disbelief that Horus can manipulate such material. Confident he can contain the threat, Horus uses his sandcraft to restrain the outer forces and quickly neutralizes the nearby ants. They push deeper into the nest until the caverns widen into the true heart of the colony. In the grand chamber, the king sits on an earthen throne, his presence as imposing as a figure from legend. When the queen steps forward to negotiate, he refuses and responds with furious threats, vowing to destroy anyone who stands against him. Tension fills the hall as Horus and the others prepare for the clash. The king was stumbling and mumbling in madness, spitting out threats of killing everyone. His sudden warning of death filled the hall with fear. Without warning, he leaped toward Horus, moving his spear with violent force. Horus immediately ordered everyone to stay back and wrapped the king in bindings of iron sand. The queen, shaken, insisted that the king had never been like this before. Horus extended his sand sense and detected another presence inside the king's head. Isis quickly understood, realizing it was a parasite demon. She suggested using life magic, while Horus prepared to tear the demon away without harming the king. He knew it required precise and steady control. To restrain him, Horus created a sand golem, but the raging king shattered it with a single strike of his spear, leaving both Isis and the queen in awe of his strength. Unfazed, Horus reformed the golem, making it larger and sturdier with iron sand, and sent it charging again. The massive golem managed to hold the king down, allowing Horus to move in. Step by step, he began extracting the parasite, carefully pulling it free. The moment it detached, the demon tried to escape, but Horus caught it instantly and neutralized it with his hand. He rushed to Isis, who confirmed that the king was safe, bringing relief to all present. The energy consumption was immense, but Horus believed the king would soon awaken. The Iron Ant King rested on the lap of the Ant Queen as she expressed her deep gratitude to Horus. He told her not to be so formal, saying he only acted as a good neighbor and trading partner. When the king opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was Isis. Startled, he grew defensive, accusing humans of coming to bring down the palace. The queen quickly explained that it was Horus who had saved him. Still confused, the king listened as she described everything. Realizing what had happened, he admitted his shame at being overtaken by a parasite and apologized to the queen for the trouble he had caused. Turning to Horus, he offered thanks and spoke of preparing apologies and gifts. Horus refused politely, saying it was unnecessary. But the king insisted that as a ruler he bore responsibility and must repay the debt. Horus raised his hand and suggested they continue discussions at his castle instead. When they arrived, both king and queen were amazed. They realized Horus was not only powerful, but also the lord of a country. The queen marveled at the beauty and decorations, noting the scale of the castle as proof of his extraordinary skill. Horus felt embarrassed by their praise, thinking the place seemed to shine under their eyes. Seated at a large table inside, Horus began the discussion by suggesting a proposal. When he asked for their names, the king and queen revealed they had none. Horus found it strange and told them it felt unfamiliar to call them only by their titles. They whispered between themselves before deciding they wanted Horus to name them. Even the Ant King appeared honored by the idea. Though hesitant, Horus finally proposed names. He suggested Ain for the king and Mel for the queen, saying he thought they suited them, though the choice was theirs. Both accepted with joy. The queen declared herself Mel, and Ain pledged to be his treasure for life. At that moment, a transformation occurred. Before them stood a majestic man, and beside him, a beautiful naked woman. Seeing the transformation, both Horus and Isis were shocked. The queen proudly called it a success, while the king agreed, though Horus quickly asked her to put on clothes. Instead, the queen declared that she and the king now belonged to Horus. This startled him even more as both of them proclaimed Horus as their king and begged to become his kin. Flustered, Horus suffered a nosebleed at the sight of her naked human form, marveling at how strange the human body appeared. Embarrassed, he insisted they needed clothes first. The queen, confused, focused instead on his nosebleed while Isis shouted for her to at least cover her front. She tried to wrap herself with a small towel, but it barely helped, causing Horus to continue bleeding as Isis pushed his face away to block his view. Eventually, Horus created a sand robe for her. Meanwhile, the king walked beside Horus, explaining that this transformation came from the naming. When a magical being receives a name from a human, it forms a contract. They had only expected to become familiars, but instead their entire forms turned human, something beyond imagination. He called it a great fortune and pledged eternal loyalty to Horus until his body returned to dust. Horus then questioned if it was difficult for them to come so far from their homeland, but the queen revealed that the entire iron ant colony had relocated to the area around his castle. Horus was stunned, unable to believe such a massive shift had already taken place. The king explained that as his kin, they were bound to remain at his side. Nearby, Mel was already with the honey ants at the oasis, weaving clothes by unraveling leaves into threads and crafting them by hand. At the same time, Isis called out to Horus and asked for his help. She suggested turning the oasis surroundings into farmland. Horus agreed it was a good idea, but noted that the sand would drain water too quickly for crops to grow. Isis acknowledged this and said they would need to create proper soil, rich and healthy for cultivation. Horus agreed and suggested they gather the necessary materials together. They agreed to gather what they needed, and Isis blushed as she nodded in response. Together with Ain and Mel, Horus set out on the journey. Before long, they found themselves hiding from a massive lion-type monster. Horus noted that despite traveling this far, it was still a dangerous beast, and he prepared to face it. Ain stepped forward, explaining that not only had their appearances changed, but their strength had also evolved. When Horus asked if he would be fine, Ain confidently assured him, raising the treasured spear he carried. With unshaken resolve, Ain charged head-on into battle against the magical beast. The clash was fierce, beast against beast, but with decisive spear thrusts infused with magic, he overwhelmed the monster. Calling it pathetic and unworthy as a challenge, he neutralized it swiftly before striking a proud pose, declaring that he had become stronger than he expected. Horus praised the Ant King's feat, and the king felt deeply honored by his words. Curious, Horus asked what kind of magic he had used. Ain explained that it was nothing more than a spear thrust imbued with magical power, as he could not use spells. Still, Horus marveled that such a simple technique had defeated a magical beast, though the Ain humbly credited his strength to Horus himself. Overhead, several ravens had been observing the battle. Mel, still strangely unclothed, noticed them first and explained that the birds were marking the meat. She unleashed an intimidating presence that quickly scattered them, removing the threat. Horus then turned to Mel, asking if the flash she had used earlier was light magic. She confirmed it proudly, saying she had gained the ability after evolving from being given a name. Since light magic was rare, Horus could not help feeling a stab of jealousy. But Mel reassured him, declaring that her power belonged entirely to him and that he could use her however he wished. Hearing this, Horus suffered another nosebleed, while Isis frowned in exasperation. To her, the fact that Mel said such things innocently only made it more troublesome. Not long after, Isis' attention was caught by something in the distance. She quickly pointed it out, and everyone turned their eyes to see what she had discovered. It was sorghum, a hardy cereal grain from the grass family. She explained that it was versatile and nourishing, and in this case it was white sorghum, which was especially nutritious and flavorful. Finding it growing wild in the desert was nothing short of a blessing. The group set about harvesting some of it while also gathering dried plants for use as field materials. Horus commended Isis for her vast knowledge of plants, telling her that it was a great help. She laughed warmly and assured him that he could always leave such matters to her. Back at Horus's palace, she reminded him of an important step in farming. Good crops come from good soil. With determination, she suggested they begin by making compost first. Horus handed the sandbag to Isis, and she accepted it with gratitude. Mel stepped forward proudly, bringing all the materials she had prepared. She carefully laid out shredded palm leaves left from the time they had made threads, dried sorghum, a bit of sand, water, and the leftover dates that had been used by the honey ants to make nectar. Everything was mixed together, and with the use of life magic, the fermentation process was greatly accelerated. The liquid was drained, and to the mixture were added dried magic beast dung and finely ground palm bark. The process was repeated, sped up again by magic, and when the final draining was done, the result was a dark, rich compost that surprised everyone with its quality. The Ant Queen had expected the smell to be unbearable, but in the end, she was impressed with how crumbly and fertile it looked. At this point, Horus stepped forward and shaped the compost into even rows, using his sand magic to prepare the land. Though it did not appear very large yet, it was clear to everyone that the foundation for a great field had been created, one that would only improve with time. Aang observed the scene with satisfaction, noting how their surroundings kept improving day by day. Horus reminded them that none of this was possible without everyone's combined efforts. The castle, the oasis, the fields, and their base of operations were the fruit of unity. Hearing this, Isis became flustered and admitted that while her work could not compare to Horus building a castle with his own hands, she still felt honored to be part of it. Their next discussion turned toward defense, and the Ant King pointed out that while the castle stood strong on a hill, the western and northern sides were exposed because of the higher dunes. If enemies came, they could use the vantage point against them. A watchtower, he explained, would solve this weakness. Horus agreed, saying that while it was not urgent, it would ensure protection for the future. He then gathered his power, and with a single large-scale spell, shaped the sand into a tall tower that rose instantly from the ground. Everyone stared in awe at the structure, amazed at what they had just witnessed. They climbed together to the top floor, where the vast desert stretched before them under a clear starlit sky. The sight left them breathless. Isis looked radiant in the glow of the stars, and Horus could not help but notice her. Meanwhile, Reiko danced around happily, drawing laughter. Aang remarked that the animals seemed to be having great fun, and Mel stayed close, making sure nothing went wrong. Horus had thought they would be basking in the mood of their accomplishment, soaking in the simplicity of the moment, yet instead it felt lively, full of their usual quirks and bonds. Just as he was reflecting on this, Reiko's mischief went too far, and in the next moment, the camel was seized by massive ravens that swooped down from the sky. Both Isis and Horus gasped at the sudden turn. As the raven carries Raku away, Horus immediately leaps from the rooftop, which makes Isis worry. He reassures her that everything is under control and unleashes his power of the sand wave to pursue them. He positions himself just beneath the raven and summons a towering pillar of sand to destabilize its flight. With the creature thrown off balance, Horus shapes a massive fist from the sand and strikes the raven hard enough to force it to release Raku. Reiko begins falling from the sky at a dangerous height. Acting quickly, Horus creates another sand pillar and rushes upward to rescue him. He catches Raku just in time and envelopes them both within a protective sphere of sand to soften their impact as they land on the ground. The shield holds firm, and when they touch down safely, Horus lets out a breath of relief. As he lies back against the sand, Horus realizes that the desert around them shimmers not with ordinary grains but with golden dust. Something unusual catches his eye, a staircase rising from the ground. He wonders what kind of entrance these stairs might conceal, and the thought of a labyrinth crosses his mind. Though confused by the strange sight, he also feels a spark of joy knowing he can now gather golden dust to add to the iron dust he has already collected. Finding no immediate danger, Horus decides to go inside with his loyal camel, who eagerly follows him. As a precaution, he summons a sturdy golem to move ahead and check for safety. The golem guides them into a wide corridor that shines brightly and soon reveals a vast ancient hall. Horus is amazed by the advanced design, since he expected a rough cave, but instead finds a polished labyrinth. Looking around, he admires the ornate pillars and suddenly thinks of using the golden dust to decorate his own castle. Still, he cannot ignore the question of whether this place is truly a labyrinth filled with monsters. A strange glow from the ceiling lights the corridor, and he wonders about its source. The path soon opens into a huge chamber where a colossal golden statue stands at the center. Horus is stunned by its size and by the gold covering every surface. As he explores further, he notices something strange. There are no monsters at all, despite his expectations. The complete absence of life, whether human or beast, makes him question the real nature of this place. To him, it feels less like a deadly labyrinth and more like a forgotten palace. His thoughts are cut short when the statue's face suddenly shifts. It becomes clear the statue is not lifeless. A disembodied voice fills the hall, announcing that the figure before them is Canid, a divine sphinx. Horus stumbles back in shock as the statue itself speaks, proving it is alive. He stares in disbelief, struggling to understand how this golden sphinx can truly talk. Horus quickly apologizes for stepping into the sacred place, but another voice assures him there is no offense taken. The unseen speaker remarks that, unlike many who are blinded by greed for gold, Horus stands out as a different kind of guest. When he tries to make a quick escape, the voice suddenly commands him to stay. A companion of the Sphinx tempts him by offering a life of comfort, yet the promise only leaves Horus uneasy. He refuses without hesitation, saying his comrades are waiting for him, and he cannot turn his back on them. The Sphinx itself finally speaks, declaring that its desire to leave shows disrespect. Realizing that he has no way out, Horus steadies himself, ready to fight if it comes to that. Amused by his courage, the Sphinx proposes a game as the golden floor begins to shake. Without warning, a massive golden spike drops from the ceiling, forcing Horus to dodge for his life. The voice explains the rules. He must solve a riddle before the spikes continue to fall. Accepting the challenge, Horus listens as the riddle is spoken. It describes a being full of contradictions, cruel but compassionate, greedy yet generous, cowardly but longing for eternity. The voice urges him to think carefully, but Horus already seems to know. With calm certainty, he declares the answer is humanity itself. The golden sphinx lets out a low sound of amusement, its expression unreadable. Then its quiet reaction erupts into thunderous laughter that shakes the grand hall. Horus begins to doubt his own answer until the voice confirms he is correct. The Sphinx explains that the laughter came only because Horus delivered such a deep truth with such ease. Leaning closer, the Sphinx studies him, intrigued by how quickly he solved the riddle. Horus calmly explains that the riddle is not truly difficult, since it reflects the essence of human nature itself. The mysterious voice then asks why, if the answer is so obvious, every challenger before him had failed. Horus suggests, with some hesitation, that knowledge was not the issue, but rather the unwillingness to admit such a harsh truth. The voice agrees and explains that pride and social status stopped others from acknowledging humanity's flaws. A reflection on the polished golden floor emphasizes the point, and the voice commends Horus for his honesty and clarity. With the test complete, Horus offers respectful thanks to his host and prepares to leave. Suddenly, the entire golden hall trembles and fills with a blinding light. A hand rises before his face, shielding him from the intense glow. When the radiance fades, he finds himself facing something completely unexpected. Standing before him is a breathtaking woman with striking features, her gaze carrying a touch of disappointment. The prince is left frozen in shock, unable to grasp what has just happened. The woman casually reveals that she is, in fact, the Sphinx now appearing in a human form. She explains that for a divine being, changing shape is a simple display of power. Stretching with ease, she admits that she rather enjoys this new human body. With a playful tone, she points out a particular drawback of her chosen form, making a bold assumption about human desires. Stepping closer, she questions his silence and makes a daring and forward proposal that leaves Horus even more stunned. The prince is stunned by her boldness, unsure why she chose this form. The Sphinx watches him closely, then seems to realize his confusion. Suddenly, Horus remembers her promise, a special reward for solving the riddle. His heart sinks as he begins to understand. With calm confidence, she reveals the true prize, herself. Her casual tone only leaves him more speechless, unsure how to respond. Before he can speak, she suddenly closes the distance, leaving him red-faced and disoriented. She explains more clearly that his prize is not just the right to leave, but the right to take her with him. Horus tries to refuse, but she counters by asking why he would reject the chance to accept a divine being as his companion. The prince wrestles with the weight of such an unbelievable offer. She then simplifies the matter by presenting it as a contract, one that grants him endless access to the golden dust. Pointing toward the sealed exit, she tells him that the only way out lies through a door that only she can open. With full confidence, she assures him she will deal with any problems that arise from their bond. To emphasize her point, she pulls him into another tight embrace, leaving Horus helpless while his camel watches with an unimpressed stare. Flustered and overheated, he asks her to step back, blaming the desert heat for his discomfort. She reluctantly releases him, though her face carries a faint trace of disappointment. Softening her tone, she asks him to give her a proper name since Sphinx feels too distant for their new relationship. After a brief pause, Horus suggests the name Phi. She lifts her gaze at the sound, a sly smile forming as she softly repeats the name, clearly pleased. Then her quiet delight turns into sudden echoing laughter, leaving the prince startled once again. Horus stares in confusion. Regaining her composure, Fi remarks that he is rather outrageous, which only deepens his shock. Without giving him time to question further, she shifts the subject and declares her loyalty to him, leaving Horus uncertain about her true intentions. Standing together in the endless desert, they seal their unusual bond, recognizing one another as master and kin. When they return to the fortress, Horus struggles to prepare an explanation for arriving with such an unexpected companion. Isis immediately confronts him with concern while holding a piece of the golden dust he has brought back. Hesitant and uneasy, Horus prompts the mysterious woman to introduce herself. Isis's eyes narrow with suspicion, certain this striking stranger must be hiding something. The woman boldly introduces herself as Fi, a sphinx who has pledged kinship to Horus. At first the others stare blankly, unable to process her words until the meaning suddenly hits them, leaving the entire group in shock. Trying to steady the moment, Horus suggests finding Fi a proper room, while Anne looks on in awe at what his lord has gained. But Fi stuns everyone by casually insisting she will be staying in Horus's quarters. The prince glances toward Isis and notices her trembling with anger at Fi's bold claim. Isis confronts her directly, arguing that while kin may remain close, it is inappropriate for someone in a female form to share a room with Horus, adding that Fi should respect her lord's privacy if she truly accepts her role. Pulling Horus aside, Isis urges him to calm the situation. He attempts to ease the tension by telling Fi to stand down for the moment. Fi smirks and makes it clear she is not retreating because of his words, but only because she has chosen to. Isis responds with a sweet but sharp smile, accepting the compromise. Ain tries to resolve the matter by offering Fi the chamber beside Horus's, but Isis is startled, pointing out that this room is actually her own. Fi remains calm and gestures toward the opposite room, asking if that one will serve instead. Isis faces her new rival and states they should get along, while Finn notes her sudden drop of formality. Horus feels a wave of relief, unaware of the heavy tension still simmering between his companions. As night falls over the desert, the chaos of the day finally quiets down. Exhausted, he lies on his bed reflecting on everything that has happened and the weight of his responsibilities. His body sinks into the mattress as fatigue overtakes him, and his mind drifts toward thoughts of shaping the kingdom's future. As dawn breaks, the door quietly opens and a shadowy figure enters. Horus wakes to find Fi sitting on his chest, smiling gently. Shocked, he panics, but Fi calmly notes that he's awake. Their moment is cut short as Isis bursts in, calling Horus's name in concern. She glares at Fi and demands an explanation. Fi calmly claims she was drowsy and entered the wrong room by mistake. The clear lie enrages Isis, and her furious scream echoes through the fortress. The rivalry has just escalated. Later at the oasis, Fi lounges lazily, complaining she's bored and wishes she were by Horus's side. With a sly smile, she claims she'd be far more useful to her master, throwing in a suggestive remark that instantly provokes Isis. Before things escalate, Mel steps in and suggests Fi prove her usefulness by helping with farm work. Accepting the challenge, Fi jumps from the water, suddenly full of energy and determination. Isis watches silently, her expression thoughtful as she reflects on the chaos from earlier. Meanwhile, Ain reassures himself that Horus and the others are fine, but his confidence is shattered when a massive explosion shakes the desert. A wave of fire surges toward them. Horus quickly raises a glowing magic circle, bracing for impact while Ain shouts in alarm. Horus stays calm, eyes locked on the approaching blaze. He summons a huge wall of iron-infused sand to block the fire, but the blast crashes through and shatters it. The force hurls Horus across the battlefield. Gasping for breath, he feels the scorched ground beneath him, barely alive. Before he can recover, another fireball streaks toward him. Acting on instinct, he raises a wave of sand to shield himself again, the earth responding to his will. Ain stares in disbelief, unable to process the power of their enemy. Horus quickly realizes this is no ordinary creature. His sharp eyes catch shimmering fragments embedded in its armor. It's the sand turtle mole, and it's been feeding on quartz, boosting its power to unnatural levels. Even with Horus's warning, Ain charges in, striking its shell with his spear. But the blow only enrages the beast. A sinister glow spreads across its back. Horus rushes to raise more iron sand walls as the creature gathers energy. Then it unleashes a massive beam of light that tears across the desert, scarring the ground. Horus and Ain sprint to escape, each glance behind them filled with growing fear. In the chaos, Horus realized the truth. The quartz crystals reflects deadly blasts. Brute force wouldn't work. Thinking fast, he changed tactics, layering iron, gold, and quartz sand to create a massive mirrored barrier. The beast fires its powerful beam, but it strikes Horus's mirrored barrier and bounces back, hitting the creature with its own attack. Overwhelmed by the blast, the turtle mole collapses with a final cry. The battle was over, and the desert fell silent. When the women arrive, Horus recounts the clash with calm composure, a sharp contrast to the intense battle that just unfolded. He gestures toward the massive crystalline shell left behind, identifying it as the remains of the defeated sand turtle mole. Isis, Mel, and Fee stare in awe, amazed by the sheer size of the carcass. Ain, however, focuses more on the glittering shell itself, wondering aloud if it's more than just a dazzling stone. Horus examines the fragments closely and identifies them as quartz. He explains its potential use in making glass, a revelation that sparks excitement in Isis and Faye, who quickly grasp the material's value. Seizing their enthusiasm, Horus announces their next project, glassmaking, starting with windows for the fortress. Without delay, he assigns tasks to each of his companions to get the operation underway. Beside the castle, a new workshop rises with a sleek, modern design. Inside, the group gathers their materials, eager to test the new craft. At Horus's signal, Faye focuses her energy and unleashes a beam of light from her eyes into the furnace. The intense heat quickly melts the quartz into a glowing liquid. Horus watches anxiously, then breathes a sigh as it works. Soon, the fortress shines with clear glass windows, their surfaces catching the sunlight. Each pane is proof of the group's teamwork and creativity. Horus walks the halls proudly, thanking his companions. To his surprise, they also reveal a mirror. Isis admires her reflection, smiling at its elegance and usefulness. The group gathers on the grand staircase, proud of their work. But the moment is broken when Mel turns to Horus in panic. Nervously, she says strange lumps have appeared. Horus is stunned, his pride quickly turning to confusion. Ain tilts his head and says he has no such lumps. Faye, dry as always, jokes that he's just walking armor. She then calmly tells Mel it's a natural part of her body changing. Mel sighs in relief, but Horus rubs his forehead, frustrated that their celebration has turned into a biology lesson. Isis sits silently, her face burning with embarrassment. Trying to ease the tension, Horus insists he didn't notice anything. But Ain, still clueless, asks if Isis also lacks those features. His question stuns her, and the room goes quiet. Finally, she snaps and yells that he's wrong. Furious and red-faced, she grabs his arm and twists it until he cries out. She tells him to focus on less personal matters and defends herself, blaming the others for setting unfair expectations. Even in the chaos, Horus can't help but smile faintly. He turns to the mirror and sees his camel admiring its reflections, posing and smiling. Slowly, everyone gathers around, laughter and teasing softening into a moan of peace. Horus watches quietly. Where there was once loneliness, now there is laughter and connection. The word family lingers in his mind, something he is only beginning to understand. Far away in a vast palace, whispers rise about a hidden figure named Morgia. Meanwhile, under the blazing desert sun, a lone traveler crosses the sands, her small figure nearly swallowed by the horizon. A single trail of footprints follows her. Each step lands with a soft thud as her staff sinks into the hot sand. Beneath her cloak, her breath comes in ragged gasps. At last, she lowers her hood, revealing sharp feline features. Moria Magrev. She has underestimated the desert's cruelty. Her hand shakes as she lifts a nearly empty water skin. Regret tugs at her. She should have forced her brothers to tell her where Horus is. But she knows they wouldn't have. With a faint gesture, she conjures a glowing flower from the air. Moria stares at the bloom, sorrow in her eyes. Doubt creeps in. What if she never finds her brother? But she steadies herself. She vows never to return to the royal castle. No one will stop her. She will keep going, no matter the cost. Then 2 rabbits hop across the sand. The sight makes her pause. Life still exists, even here. She narrows her eyes, wondering what it means. But the moment is short-lived. The sand erupts beneath her. A massive frog-like monster bursts out, its mouth wide and filled with sharp teeth. It lets out a thunderous roar. Moria stumbles back, realizing too late that she's walked into an ambush. The creature's huge eye locks onto her. It croaks deeply and lashes out. Its tongue snaps forward like lightning. Moria moves quickly, sidestepping with calm precision. the sand swirling at her feet. She lifts her staff and channels spatial magic. In a flash, the monster vanishes. Moria briefly gained the upper hand, but a single touch from the monster's tongue poisons her. The venom spreads quickly, weakening her until she collapses. Overwhelmed and unable to resist, she falls unconscious in the desert. Later at Horus's castle, he and Isis sit together for a meal and casually discuss how life has become more convenient for them lately. While cracking open a crab, Horus remarks that it would be even better if he could use spatial magic like his little sister. Isis nods in agreement, and both she and Phi curiously ask Horus if he truly has a younger sister, since he has never spoken of his family before. The rest of his kin lean closer, eager to know more about their lord's family. Horus pauses mid-bite, realizing he has never told them how he came here nor the circumstances of his banishment. Since it is not a cheerful story, he decides to keep it brief. He explains that he was exiled for possessing only a single attribute, sand. He goes on to reveal that he has 4 elder brothers, but only his little sister Morgia ever cared for him sincerely. He also resisted the Empire's aggression, which further sealed his fate. That is all he shares. Ain, however, slams the table in fury, declaring it outrageous and that a king has so severely underestimated Lord Horus's true power. Fid joins in, calling the human she has known in her life foolish for failing to see worth where it truly lies. Isis asks quietly if that means only his sister ever understood him. Nell then remarks how strange it is that his sister turned out so different from the rest of the family. Horus reflects on this and realizes that Morgia may have inherited more from their mother, who disliked conflict and cherished peace. His thoughts wander as he wonders if his sister is doing well. Their talk is interrupted when ants hurry into the hall, and Ain immediately translates what they said. He reports that in the southwest, they discovered a girl collapsed. Horus quickly asks for her description. After thinking for a moment, Ain explains she has blonde hair tied into 2 sides and jewel-like eyes. He further adds that she was attacked by monsters, but managed to drive them away before succumbing to a strong paralytic poison. Unable to move, she was later abducted by goblin sand. Horus's voice turns sharp with determination as he declares that the girl must be Morgia. He insists they must save her quickly, or the consequences could be dire, as had once nearly happened with Isis. Finn notes calmly that one of the scouts has been tailing the goblins, and by following their scent, they can track them down. Without delay, Horus opens the window, summons a wave of sand, and rushes out with his companions. Ain leads the way, but Phi warns Horus not to let worry cloud his judgment. She explains that while goblin sand are known for slyness and traps, they have never before shackled someone and carried them away. That deviation unsettles her, and she insists they must not be careless. Horus assures her he already knows and is not being reckless. Taking a magic orb into his hand, he braces himself just as a raven swoops down at them. They manage to dodge the sudden strike unharmed. Isis looks unsettled, admitting she didn't even notice how they avoided the attack so smoothly. Soon they arrive at their destination. Horus notices an ant waiting and decides to follow it. The trail leads him to a small flower blooming in the sand. Picking it up carefully, he announces that it is a sandflower, the very same he once sent to his sister. This confirms without doubt that the girl is indeed Morgia, and she has been captured by goblin sand. Phi states that the pheromone trail continues further and urges them to follow. They proceed until they reach the goblin sand base, hiding behind large stones at the edge of the enemy's camp. Several goblin guards stand at the entry. The ants whisper that if they had more strength, they could be more useful. Ain translates this for Horus. Smiling warmly, Horus lifts the ant into his palm and gently pets it, telling them that they are already invaluable to him. Without them, he would never have come this far to rescue Morgia. Feeling touched, Ain suddenly drops to his knees and asks Horus to pet him as well. This bold request leaves everyone stunned. Nell quickly joins in, asking for the same, and soon even Phi follows her lead, leaving both Horus and Isis completely speechless. Breaking the strange moment, Nell volunteers to go first toward the goblin guards. As the others watch from behind the stones, she moves forward, setting their rescue mission into motion. Mel moves first and uses her light magic technique to destroy the goblins blocking the path. Phi follows with her precise technique and cuts a massive stone into 2 clean halves. The falling pieces crush several guard goblins, and the rest panic. They scream for their allies as fear spreads among them. Prince Horus orders everyone to proceed further. Ain stays ready for the messengers, while Phi moves with Prince Horus to subdue the remaining enemies. The group advances exactly as commanded. Meanwhile, Isis remains behind for a moment and wonders if she will ever fight with the same confidence as the others. Her thoughts are interrupted when a lone goblin jumps at her. She reacts fast and defeats it. After all guard goblins are destroyed, they assume the threat has ended, but each explosion in the distance brings more goblins running toward them. Prince Horus realizes that the fight will not stop until they find Morgiana. He directs everyone toward the cave ahead. Inside the cave, he warns them to stay alert. Mel lights up the surroundings with a soft glow, and they move deeper while holding their swords and weapons ready for an ambush. After a careful search, they finally find Morgiana. Her hands and feet are tightly tied, and she looks exhausted. Rage rises in Prince Horus when he sees her in that condition, and he prepares to charge forward. Isis quickly stops him because a goblin shaman stands near Morgiana, and behind the shaman, a massive goblin giant guards the area. Ayan suggests that the monster could be the Goblin King, but Fi explains that it is only a giant goblin. Isis worries that the shaman's magic and the giant's brute strength together make an overwhelming combination. Fi steps forward and says she can destroy everything in an instant, but Isis fears that Morgiana will be harmed in the blast. Prince Horus forces himself to think calmly and forms a plan. Fi will be their hidden weapon, and she will act only when he gives the signal. Fi agrees, although she knows the situation is risky. A huge number of goblins fill the cave and surround the shaman and the giant. Prince Horus examines them carefully and notices that they show the same obsession for shining objects as the sand goblins they faced earlier. He decides to use gold dust as bait to distract the horde. Even though they remain fewer in number, he prepares another strategy to rescue his sister and defeat the enemies. With the plan set, the group takes their positions and prepares for the decisive fight ahead. Prince Horus begins the next phase of his plan by using the golem to draw the attention of the goblins. Their focus shifts completely toward the moving construct, which gives the group a narrow chance to move closer to Morgiana. Prince Horus hides nearby under a cloth veil and surveys the surroundings with calm precision. Mel glances at him and wonders if something is wrong, but he reassures her that he is only observing every movement around them. He wants to approach the enemies without alerting them, so Mel stays close to him. A little earlier, Prince Horus had already explained the strategy in detail. Fi and Ain will operate the golem to pull the goblins away, while Mel and Prince Horus will slip forward under the mirror veil and rescue Morgia. Mel worries that if she stays too close, he will not be able to fight at his full strength. However, he clarifies that he does not intend to fight until Morgiana is safely behind them. He also needs Mel's light magic to blind the enemies at the right moment. Everyone agrees to the plan, and the operation begins. Fi steps forward and directs the golem to a more visible spot. The goblins notice the movement instantly, and the shaman launches the first attack toward Fi and Ain. The goblin giant rises with heavy steps and prepares to strike. The battle tension increases as the enemies focus on the distraction. Prince and Mel use this gap to move through the shadows. The giant suddenly swings toward them, but Horus raises a sand wall to block the attack. He signals Mel, and she unleashes a flash of light. The goblins lose their sight temporarily. In that brief opening, Horus reaches Morgiana and lifts her, but the goblin giant quickly notices and begins to chase him. Prince carries Morgiana out of danger and hands her to Isis. He instructs her to leave the cave with Morgiana while he turns back to face the shaman and the goblin giant. The shaman begins reinforcement magic, and the giant prepares to strike again. Horus no longer worries about Morgia being hurt by stray spells because she is already out of the immediate battle. Now he can fight without restraint. He summons his iron sand spear with full power and unleashes a destructive strike that pierces through the goblin giant and shatters the shaman's defenses. Both enemies fall, and the cave turns quiet again. Ain and Fi praise the prince for ending the threat so decisively. Prince Horus then rushes to Morgiana. She is unconscious, but slowly opens her eyes. When she sees her brother, she embraces him with relief and happiness. He holds her gently and assures her that she is safe. Isis watches them with warm affection, feeling emotional at the sight of their reunion. However, Fi reminds them that it is not the right time to relax. When everyone looks back, they notice Morgiana clinging to Prince Horus a little too tightly. She presses her face against his chest, trying to take in his scent. She stays wrapped around him without letting go. She expresses that she has been longing for him every day and that her emotions are overflowing after being separated for so long. Her behavior feels strange to Fi and Isis. Morgiana grows more intense and urges Prince Horus to hold her tighter. Isis studies Morgiana's eyes and sees a cold expression that appears as if she is glaring at enemies. Morgiana then glances toward the others and begins making harsh judgments. She refers to Phi as a dark-skinned, suspicious woman who seems capable of seducing men. She describes Mel as an unbalanced girl with a young face and a mature body who will ruin men. She calls Isis a witch, pretending to be harmless while secretly scheming to steal Prince Horus. Morgiana questions why they are around him at all. Everyone hears her remarks clearly. Ain even asks what she thinks of him. Horus steps in and tells her that they are his comrades who fought beside him and helped rescue her. Morgiana realizes her words are rude and apologizes. Although she remains upset, she states that she cannot allow anyone to take her brother away from her. Horus feels awkward because he has never seen her behave this clingy. He wonders if the loneliness and danger she faced while being captured might have changed her emotional state. He then notices the shackles on her wrists and tells her to place them on the ground so he can break them. He uses his sand blade to cut the chain, but the metal remains completely undamaged. Ain tries next with his strength, but nothing changes. They turn to Phi for help, but she examines the shackles and states that a curse inscription is engraved into them. Even she cannot erase it. Isis decides to use her magic to make the chain reveal its nature. She channels her spell, but the shackles remain silent, and everyone begins to feel hopeless. Then suddenly, the chain starts speaking. The chain suddenly speaks and declares that it will not come off easily. Everyone freezes in shock at the sound of its voice. Morgiana widens her eyes in disbelief and steps back slightly as she realizes the chain is alive. She finds it unsettling and calls it gross. The chain reacts with annoyance and complains that it has been given a will, so being called gross is rude. Horus asks what kind of spell allows an object to talk. Isis explains that her magic can grant life to drawings, and sometimes high-level magical tools develop a will of their own. She had hoped to ask the chain directly to unlock itself, but the chain responds that its purpose is to lock, not unlock, so removing itself is impossible. Isis asks if there is any alternative. The chain states that if its heart locks onto someone else instead, it might consider detaching from Morgiana. Morgiana refuses immediately. Isis saved her, so she does not want Isis to get into danger. Ain suggests that they should not force anything that might harm Morgiana, but the chain warns them not to attempt separation anyway. If they remove it by force, the girl's spirit will be torn apart and she will die. This means the shackle will remain with the group for a long time. Morgiana accepts her fate and decides that the chain's new name will be Shakal. She tells the chain to address her as its boss. Shakal accepts this obediently. Phi then suggests that they explore deeper into the cave since goblins often hoard valuables. They might find something useful to counter the curse. The group moves forward. Shakal complains that they should not get their hopes up because removing it is unlikely. Isis feels uneasy as she sees Morgiana still clinging closely in Prince Horus's arms while he carries her. She points out that their closeness seems unusual for ordinary siblings. Morgiana brushes off the concern and insists that it is normal. She acts affectionately toward Prince Horus and gazes at him with intense devotion. She declares that his attention should belong to her alone. Phi steps forward and advises Morgia to show respect to her benefactors. She reminds her that Horus and the others fought to save her. He stands silently, unsure how to handle Morgiana's behavior. At that moment, she uses teleportation magic. Morgiana thanks them for rescuing her, but claims that personal matters must remain separate. She refuses to let anyone stay close to her brother. With Isis and Phi displaced, Prince Horus is left holding Morgiana while Shakal rattles quietly. The tension grows as Morgiana tightens her grip around him with possessive determination. The group now faces not only cursed shackles but also Morgia's increasingly unstable attachment and unpredictable magic. They move deeper into the cave and examine the interior. The passage becomes more twisted and complex as they walk. The structure suggests that goblins may have hidden hostages somewhere inside. Prince Horus suddenly stops. He hears faint voices echoing from a narrow path and signals everyone to follow him. They reach a darker chamber and notice a cage pushed into the corner. A foul and heavy smell fills the air, which makes Prince Horus frown. Inside the cage, several frightened kids sit huddled together. Ain uses his strength and breaks the cage door. Horus steps forward and reaches out his hand, telling them to come out, but the kids shrink back in fear. He realizes that they are terrified, and he notices metal collars fastened around their necks. The sight makes him understand that these kids are slaves. One kid picks up a broken piece of iron and points it at them. He demands to know what they want and asks if they have come to sell them again. Isis immediately steps in front. She kneels and shows gentle gestures. Her posture makes it clear that she intends no harm. The kids slowly realize she is not a threat. Isis uses her life magic on one of the injured boys. A green glow surrounds the wound, and it heals completely. The other kids watch in awe. Horace asks the kids to trust them, and most of them agree, but one girl steps forward and shakes her head. She reveals that only the male kids wear collars, and she shows a dark mark on her arm. She says they are under a slow goblin curse. Fi examines the mark and understands that their bodies were magically altered so they could bear goblin offspring. The revelation shocks everyone. Morgiana uses her magic and removes the collars. She states that these collars are old models and harmless to take off. Isis moves to the girls and uses her life magic again. She rewinds their body state, and slowly, the curse marks vanish. The kids look at their bodies in disbelief. Every collar and every dark mark is gone. They are no longer slaves. Relief and joy spread across their faces. However, one of the boys raises another concern. They are still registered in the slave guild. Morgiana reassures them that Prince Horus will soon become king of the desert land. She tells them that once he takes the throne, they have nothing to fear. Horus agrees and promises that he will protect them. The kids stare at him with grateful eyes. Tears shine as they thank him wholeheartedly. Horus then tells them that they should return to treasure hunting, as leaving the cave empty-handed is wasteful. One kid questions how that is possible since this place is a goblin nest. Prince Horus answers confidently that he has already defeated the goblins. The kids stand stunned and amazed by this. Their admiration grows when Morgiana and Isis explain that Horus controls sand magic and that he is the perfect king for the desert. The kids cheer for him and begin addressing him as their majesty with bright smiles. Prince Horus feels slightly awkward as Fi steps closer to him. She tells him that this is a moment of pride, that he has accomplished so much. He built a castle, evolved monsters into human forms, and even tamed divine beasts. Hearing this, the kids and Fi praise him further, calling him an incredible king. Fi adds that he is fortunate because kings are meant to be surrounded by devoted followers. She moves closer and begins guiding him, pulling him subtly as she whispers encouragement. Horus cannot understand what she is doing at first. She continues to urge him, saying that a king must not hesitate in moments like this. The kids, embarrassed by the scene, cover their eyes. Seeing this, Mel and Morgiana feel jealous. They step forward, insisting on serving the king themselves. Horus grows more awkward and tells them he does not want anything like this, but the girls persist. Isis observes quietly at first. The kids notice her hesitance and encourage her to join them. She hesitates but eventually gathers courage and approaches Horus. Grabbing his sleeve shyly, she calls to him. Horus turns and sees Isis with a red-tinged face, looking flustered. He becomes instantly flustered at the sight. Morgiana grows angry, exclaiming that her brother has fallen prey to the witch's charms. The kids blush at the awkward tension surrounding their king. After the moment passes, the group enters a deeper chamber in the cave for treasure hunting. The interior sparkles with glamorous sand scattered across the floor. Prince Horus is surprised at the sight. One of the kids explains that the sand is full of jewels, diamonds, rubies, sapphires, and pearls. Fi notices seashells mixed in with the sand, suggesting that the goblins may have gathered them for food. Mel and Fi feel elated at the unexpected bounty, especially after just saving Morgiana. Horus, however, does not share their excitement, stating that jewels hold no real value. Fi reassures him that even seemingly small treasures are never useless. She scoops up a handful of the jewel sand and shows him its potential. Horus concentrates and shapes the sand into a diamond golem using his sand magic. Everyone watches in awe at the lifelike construct. Morgiana urges him to take all of the treasure home. Horus instructs them to gather as much as their castle can hold for the moment. As they begin collecting the sparkling sand, a note catches their eyes. Written on the cave wall, it warns that removing anything from this place is forbidden. The message is signed by the servant of the great sand king, the Sphinx. The group pauses, taking in the warning. They leave the cave with the kids. Prince Horus uses his sand magic to make everyone move quickly. The group rides on it swiftly across the desert. The wind whips past as the speed of their flight leaves the kids cheering and laughing. Still, Horus feels uneasy. He turns to Fi and asks if they ignored the warning from the Sphinx. He worries that their actions might bring consequences beyond their understanding. Fi reassures him, saying that the king's orders do not extend to the desert lands where they currently live. Horus remains cautious, noting that he is not yet king and the territory could still be claimed by someone else. Eventually, they reach the castle. The kids are awestruck by the enormous sand fortress. Raku appears from the courtyard and beams with joy at their return. The kids notice him too and rush forward excitedly. The camels nearby tilt their heads in surprise at seeing the group descend from the sky. Horus explains to Raku that he rescued the kids and introduces his younger sister, Morgiana. He remarks that the castle will feel lively once again with everyone back. Morgiana, however, is puzzled by how her brother communicates so naturally with a camel. Horus then asks Morgiana what she had been doing in the desert. She seems tired of recounting the ordeal. Isis interjects with curiosity, questioning if Horus had treated others harshly. Morgiana shakes her head and clarifies that her brother has never been harsh. She explains that once people discovered Horus's sand magic, their attitudes shifted. They no longer felt guilty about abandoning him in the Empire, but Morgiana always knew it was wrong. She recalls feeling angry and hurt that others left her brother behind, foolish for abandoning him. Morgiana acknowledges that all that has happened proves Horus's greatness. She admits that the moment she left to find him, she never felt regret. From now on, she intends to stay by her brother's side no matter what occurs. Horus feels flustered at her determination. Phi smiles proudly, seeing Morgiana make the right choice as Horus's sister. Later that night, in the Goblin Cave, a man enters carrying a notebook. He notices the sand and jewels scattered across the floor and freezes in surprise. Around him lie the corpses of goblins and the remains of the destroyed cage. He deduces that someone must have defeated the goblins, freed the kids, and collected the treasure. His eyes fall on the note etched into the wall by the Sphinx. He reads the warning carefully, but struggles to understand its intent. He wonders if a divine beast might have been involved, perhaps consuming the slaves. He reasons that if a beast had intervened, there would have been no need to break the cage at all. After observing everything, the man concludes that the events were orchestrated by someone powerful, yet intelligent. They freed the slaves, defeated the goblins, and left the note as a warning to prevent interference. He records the scene and takes the note, treating it as a final report of what transpired. The cave remains quiet except for the lingering glow of jewel sand, marking the extraordinary deeds of Prince Horus and his companions. In the capital city of the Eldorado Republic, Eldora, the reporter arrives at Tonarasan's mansion, carrying the detailed account of his observations from the Desert of Death. He lays out every detail, explaining the Goblin Cave, the rescued children, the jewel sand, and the magical events he witnessed. A healthy man holding a wine glass in his hand listens carefully. He thanks the reporter for his diligence and asks if the information has been shared with anyone else. The reporter assures him that it has not. The man nods and signs a document. His attendants bring forward the reporter's reward. After collecting it, the reporter leans slightly forward and remarks that the information he has brought is extremely valuable. He hints that future rewards would be appropriate for such intelligence. The man laughs loudly, understanding the subtle request. He instructs the attendants to give the reporter an additional reward, and then, without warning, signals for his men to strike. The reporter's head falls cleanly from his body. The maid gasps, terrified by the sudden violence. The butler stands frozen, unsure of how to react. The man, Tonarasan, notices him and offers a generous sum of money, warning him to remain silent and have no complaints. The butler, still shaken, nods quickly. At that moment, a magician-like figure enters the room. He addresses the butler, informing him that his duties as a servant have ended and that he has been replaced. From this point on, the magician is known as Alibaba. Tonarasan asks Alibaba if he can make the Chamber of Commerce in Magenta more flexible, teasing him by calling him a stray cat. Alibaba smirks and replies that Tonarasan cannot even keep track of time, so how could he enforce contracts properly? He adds that it is acceptable to break agreements if necessary, since Tonarasan's trading company is clever enough to handle any fallout. Tonarasan stands to tidy up the room, while Alibaba magically collects the remnants of the reporter's notes into a small box. After that, Alibaba settles on the sofa, ordering a luxurious meal. Alibaba's assistant, observing quietly, comments on the strange reputation surrounding Tonarasan. He admits that they cannot act until Tonarasan makes the first move. The assistant notes the dangers of the desert and wonders if Alibaba is nervous about the journey ahead. Alibaba explains that gold mining in the Magreth Empire has decreased, requiring the Eldorado Republic to import gold for its coins. This situation presents an opportunity for the Tonarasan Trading Company to profit, potentially even surpassing the Empire's authority. The assistant asks if such a thing is possible. Alibaba mentions rumors that the desert is filled with treasures and resources. He wonders about a certain man who claimed he would venture into the desert, curious if he is managing well there. In the Desert of Death, a cat-like woman sprints desperately, crying for help. She leaps over the skulls of the fallen, a massive snake slithering behind her, its fangs snapping. Her shouts pierce the still desert air. Suddenly, a glowing sand spear erupts from the ground. Prince Horus appears, wielding sand magic. He strikes the snake cleanly in half, silencing its attack. The woman realizes that a human has saved her, and relief floods her expression. She runs toward him, exhausted and grateful, seeking safety from the desert's relentless dangers.
Here I am, know it's been a while. understand.